He stormed into the kitchen and saw her clutching the little girl's shake with trembling hands. For a split second, Vincent Russo couldn't breathe. The new housekeeper, this fragile woman he had barely spoken to, was pouring the thick purple liquid down the sink, her face twisted in terror. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice cut like a blade through the marble room. Elena Ramirez looked up at him, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks, her thin body shaking violently. And what she said next would shatter his entire world. 3 years. That was how long Vincent Russo had been watching his empire stand strong, while something inside his own home was slowly killing a child. 3 years of the best doctor's money could buy, walking through his lakeside compound like ghosts, shaking their heads with expensive silence. 3 years of special recovery shakes and nutritional protocols that cost more than most families earned in a lifetime. 3 years of watching an 8-year-old girl fade away right under his roof. And no one could tell him why. Lily had grown sick shortly after she and her mother moved into the staff quarters. It started with fatigue, stomach pain, and sudden weakness. Then came the tremors, the vomiting, the nights she cried out in pain while clutching her thin American flag blanket. Vinny had already lost so much on the streets of Chicago's South Side. He couldn't lose this fragile life too, not when he had finally begun to suspect the devastating truth. Because deep down a terrible suspicion had started to eat at him. Lily was his daughter, the child he had abandoned years ago, out of fear that fatherhood would make him weak, and now she was dying in his own mansion. Then Elena Ramirez walked into his life. She was never meant to be anything more than temporary help, a desperate, malnourished single mother from the South Side projects, barely 32, but looking closer to 40, worn down by 2 dead-end jobs, eviction threats, and nights so cold the wind howled through the cracks like knives. She had nothing left, no food, no safety. Only 2 little girls depending on her, her own daughter Lily and Lily's 9-year-old best friend Mia, who had nowhere else to go. But Elena carried a promise burned into her soul. 5 years earlier she had stayed silent when doctors dismissed her own sister's pain. She watched her sister die because she was too afraid to question those with power and white coats. That day at the gravesite, standing in the pouring rain, she swore never again. If her gut ever screamed again, she would speak no matter the cost, no matter how powerless she felt. When Vinny offered her the emergency live-in position, Elena took it with shaking hands. It meant shelter. It meant hot meals. It meant safety for Lily and Mia. But from the first week, she started noticing things no one else saw. Lily got violently ill every single time after drinking those special recovery shakes prepared by Dr. Victor Kane. But on the rare mornings she refused them, or fell asleep before finishing, the little girl was different. Brighter eyes, stronger voice. She even laughed. No one else noticed. Not Vinny buried in his empire and street confrontations. Not the polished Dr. Kane who smiled with cold confidence and called the shakes essential. Elena kept watching, kept counting. Then one afternoon she found Dr. Kane's personal blender left in the sink, still wet residue clinging to the sides like a guilty secret. The smell hit her like poison. Bitter, chemical, wrong. Her hands shook as she snapped a photo, swabbed a sample, and hid it in her pocket. 2 days later, her cousin Marcus, a pharmacology student, called her back, voice trembling with horror. "Elena, what you sent me isn't medicine. It's oleander extract, a plant-based toxin. Small doses over time would look exactly like a slow, mysterious illness. Someone is poisoning that little girl." Elena's blood turned to ice. She rushed back to Lily's room, heart hammering, and tore open the medically approved pillow. Dr. Kane insisted the child sleep on every night. Inside the lining were small hidden sachets filled with the same white powder. Powder Lily had been breathing in for months while she slept. That was the moment Vincent Russo walked in. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come from expensive doctors or powerful men. Sometimes it comes from the poorest, most broken woman in the house, the one everyone overlooks, the one who has already paid the price of silence with her own sister's life. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe sends the most unlikely person at the exact moment a child's life hangs by a thread. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a Sevenant life. The October wind off Lake Michigan cut through the streets of Chicago's South Side like a knife in 2025. It howled between the cracked bricks of the old housing project buildings, carrying the smell of damp concrete fried food from corner stands and the faint metallic tang of rusting fences. Elena Ramirez pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her thin frame and hurried along the broken sidewalk, her sneakers soaked from puddles that never seemed to dry. She was 32 years old, American-born, in this very neighborhood, but life had worn her down until she looked closer to 40. Her cheeks were hollow, her dark hair dull and pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and her eyes, once bright with quiet hope, now carried the heavy shadows of too many sleepless nights. She had not eaten a full meal in 3 days. The last can of beans had gone to her 8-year-old daughter Lily, and Lily's 9-year-old best friend Mia, who had been staying with them since her own mother lost their apartment. The 3 of them shared a single room in a rundown unit, where the heat worked only half the time. The walls were thin enough to hear every argument in the building, and the wind whistled through gaps around the windows at night. Elena worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices downtown until midnight, the other stocking shelves at a 24-hour store, but the pay barely covered the rent that kept rising while her hours kept shrinking. Eviction notices had already been slipped under the door twice this month. She had hidden them from the girls, but the fear gnawed at her constantly. This morning had been especially cruel. The landlord had banged on the door at 6 o'clock, yelling about the overdue rent and threatening to change the locks by the end of the week. Elena had stood there in her thin nightshirt voice, soft and trembling, apologizing politely, even as humiliation burned in her chest. "Please, sir, I just need a few more days," she had whispered, eyes downcast. He had laughed and walked away, leaving her dizzy with panic. Her hands had shaken so badly afterward that she dropped the last box of cereal. Lily had tried to help pick it up, her small face, pale and tired, while Mia stood guard by the door like a tiny soldier, fists clenched. The unfairness of it all tore at Elena's heart. She had done everything right, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, raised the girls with love, despite having nothing but the world kept punishing her for being poor. As she walked toward the bus stop, another gust of wind nearly knocked her off balance. She felt lightheaded, a wave of numbness spreading through her limbs. For a moment the sidewalk tilted, and she had to grab a lamppost to steady herself. Pain throbbed behind her eyes. How much longer could she keep this up? The girls deserved better than cold nights huddled under one thin American flag blanket that had once belonged to Elena's late father. A veteran who had left them nothing but memories and that faded flag. Lily's little body was already so frail, coughing too often, her energy fading day by day. Mia tried to act tough, but Elena saw the fear in her eyes whenever the power flickered off. Across town in a fortified compound along the Lakeshore Drive area, Vincent Russo stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his private study, staring out at the gray October water. He was a fair-skinned American man, in his mid-40s, born and raised on the South Side before climbing the ranks through intelligence, loyalty, and calculated ruthlessness. Now he controlled a powerful network of legitimate businesses, construction firms, trucking companies that masked deeper operations. Wealth surrounded him: marble floors, dark wood paneling, a custom wine cellar, and views that cost more per month than most families earned in a year. Yet none of it eased the gnawing guilt that had lived in his chest for years. Vinny's hands clenched at his sides. He had survived another tense street confrontation just 2 nights earlier. A rival faction had tried to muscle in on one of his trucking routes near the old steel mill areas. The meeting in a dimly lit warehouse parking lot had been icy words, sharp eyes, locked, veiled threats hanging in the cold air. No guns drawn, but the danger had been real. Vinny had stood tall voice, calm and commanding, reminding them who held the real power in this city. They had backed down, but the encounter left him restless. Power demanded constant vigilance, and vigilance left no room for weakness. Or so he had always believed. Yet lately something inside him was cracking. Late at night, when the compound was quiet except for the distant hum of security systems, memories surfaced. He thought of a brief relationship years ago with a woman from the South Side. He had walked away when things got serious, terrified that fatherhood would make him soft, vulnerable to enemies who would use any personal tie against him. He had told himself it was protection for her for any child that might come. But the remorse had never left. It consumed him in quiet moments, a violent, emotional storm beneath his composed exterior. What kind of man abandoned his own blood to the streets while he lived like this? His estate manager, Mrs. Delgado, a stern woman in her 50s with graying hair, pulled tightly back, entered the study carrying a thick folder. "The new live-in housekeeper and nanny candidate is ready for interview, Mr. Russo. Emergency placement. Her references check out, but she's from the projects." Struggling badly from what the agency said. Vinny turned his blue eyes sharp but shadowed with inner conflict. Bring her in. We need someone reliable for the household after the last one quit. Image matters for the legitimate side of things. Stable home family presence. His voice was deep authoritative, yet a flicker of something softer crossed his face. He had requested someone who could help manage the large property and perhaps bring a touch of normalcy. He did not know yet how that decision would upend everything. Elena arrived at the iron gates of the compound after 2 long bus rides and a nervous walk from the nearest stop. She gripped the worn strap of her canvas bag, the same one she used for both jobs. The gates opened slowly with a mechanical hum, revealing manicured lawns, a grand stone and glass mansion that looked more like a modern fortress than a home. Everything was sharp, clean, expensive. Security cameras tracked her every step. Her heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and disbelief. This world felt alien, almost unreal, compared to the leaking ceilings and shouting neighbors she had left behind that morning. A uniformed driver met her at the entrance and led her inside. The entryway was vast, polished marble floors, a sweeping staircase art on the walls that probably cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. The air smelled faintly of leather and fresh flowers. Elena's thin shoes made almost no sound, but she felt every inch of her poverty in this place. The frayed hem of her coat, the hollows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. She was desperate, powerless, yet a spark of curiosity flickered beneath the fear. Who lived like this? And why would they need someone like her? Mrs. Delgado met her in a side office, her expression professional but cool. "You're late by 4 minutes," she said flatly, though Elena had actually arrived early after rushing. "I'm Mrs. Delgado, estate manager. You'll report to me. Duties include general housekeeping and helping with any child-related needs if the situation arises. You are not to enter private offices or question anything beyond your role. Mr. Russo values discretion above all." Elena nodded, her voice soft and polite, almost timid. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." Inside, her mind raced with confusion and guarded hope. This job paid far better than her current ones. It offered a room on the property shelter for her and the girls. But the rules felt suffocating, and the sheer wealth on display made her stomach twist with a strange mix of awe and shame. Mrs. Delgado led her upstairs to a private wing. The house grew quieter. The higher they climbed, the air cooler, more controlled. When they reached a suite of rooms, Mrs. Delgado paused. "Mr. Russo is a busy, powerful man. He has faced many challenges in his line of work, rival interests, street-level tensions. He expects loyalty and silence. The previous staff member asked too many questions and was let go." Elena swallowed hard, feeling a wave of disorientation. The contrast hit her violently this morning. She had begged a slumlord not to evict her from a freezing room, and now she stood in a mansion where one man's decisions could reshape lives. Her inner turmoil surged fear of failing, horror at how easily she could be discarded again, yet a desperate, numbing hope that this might be the break she and the girls needed. As they continued the tour, Vinny appeared at the end of the hallway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. His fair skin and sharp features gave him an air of quiet authority. When his eyes met, Elena's something unexpected happened deep in his chest. A fierce, passionate surge of protectiveness, almost love at first sight, though not romantic, flooded him. This woman looked so fragile, so utterly depleted by life's cruelties, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. In that instant, memories of the child he had abandoned years ago crashed over him. Guilt gnawed viciously. Remorse consumed him like fire. What if this woman had struggles like the ones he had caused? What if a child suffered somewhere because of his choices? He stepped forward, voice steady, but eyes betraying inner storm. "You must be Elena. Welcome. We need reliable help here. The pay is generous, and there's housing on site." He studied her malnourished frame, the exhaustion in her posture, and felt a violent emotional conflict tear at him, his powerful world versus her powerless one. He wanted with sudden intensity to shield her from the unfairness that had clearly broken her down. Elena looked up at him, timid and polite, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sir. I'll work hard. I have a daughter and her friend who depend on me." She felt dizzy again, shock and confusion swirling. Why did this powerful man look at her with such intensity? It was not pity exactly, but something deeper, responsibility perhaps. It frightened her, and stirred a fragile curiosity at the same time. Vinny nodded, masking the turmoil raging inside. Another confrontation with rivals loomed tomorrow on a South Side construction site, tense words, veiled power plays under the October sky. He could not afford softness. Yet seeing Elena's quiet misery stripped bare every layer of his remorse, he resolved then in that hallway to offer her the protection his empire could provide. Not out of charity, but out of a sudden, overwhelming sense of duty that felt almost paternal. As Mrs. Delgado continued the tour, showing Elena the modest but clean staff quarters far better than the project room with its leaking roof, Elena's mind spun. She pictured Lily and Mia's faces when she told them they might have a safer place. Tears pricked her eyes in a moment of condensed emotional stillness. The absurdity of her life struck her yesterday, begging for mercy from a cruel landlord today, stepping into a world of marble and money. Vinny watched from afar as she explored the space. His heart twisted with consuming guilt and violent inner conflict. He had built walls of power to survive the streets, but those walls had cost him pieces of his soul. This destitute woman, with her soft voice and exhausted eyes, had walked through his gates, and somehow reached the part of him that still remembered what it meant to protect the vulnerable. He felt an intense, passionate surge to shield her and whatever children depended on her, the same fierce responsibility he wished he had shown years ago. Outside, the Chicago wind continued to howl, carrying the distant sounds of the city. Inside the compound, two worlds had collided, one defined by extreme poverty and quiet desperation, the other by wealth-hidden power and a man's deepening emotional storm. Neither Elena nor Vinny could yet know how profoundly this meeting would change them both. How one act of offering shelter would spark a journey of compassion, protection, and the slow healing of wounds carried by a powerful adult, and the vulnerable children who would soon enter his life. The luxury kitchen glowed under bright white daylight pouring through tall windows. The space looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel, pristine white marble countertops, gleaming stainless steel appliances, and custom cabinetry that cost more than most people earned in a decade. Yet the polished floor told a different story. Toys lay scattered everywhere, colorful building blocks, stuffed animals, a small pink doll with one shoe missing, and a yellow toy truck overturned near the island. Elena Ramirez stood just inside the doorway, her thin frame almost swallowed by the vastness of the room. She had moved into the staff quarters only yesterday, with her 8-year-old daughter Lily, and Lily's 9-year-old best friend Mia. The girl's eyes were still wide with disbelief at the clean beds, warm blankets, and the simple but steady meals provided. For Elena, the contrast was almost too much to bear. Only 48 hours earlier, she had been begging a landlord not to throw them into the October wind. Now she wore a simple housekeeper uniform, her hands trembling slightly as she held a soft cloth. The two little girls, Lily in a soft pink dress that Vinny had quietly arranged through Mrs. Delgado, and Mia in a bright yellow one, suddenly burst into the kitchen. Their small bare feet slapped against the marble as they ran forward, faces streaked with tears, voices breaking into loud sobs. Miss Elena Lily cried, her voice high and frightened. Mia clutched her friend's hand, tears flowing freely. "She's mean. She yelled at us for playing." In front of them stood the temporary nanny, a white woman in her 30s, dressed in a neat blue dress with a crisp white apron. One hand rested firmly on her hip while the other gripped a pink plastic stick she had been using to tap the counter for emphasis. Her expression was cold, her mouth set in a thin line of irritation. "They need discipline," she said sharply, not even glancing at Elena. "This is not a playground. Mr. Russo expects order." Elena's heart lurched. She stepped forward instinctively, her voice soft, timid, and polite, the way she had learned to speak to people with authority. "Please, ma'am. They're only little. They didn't mean any harm. Her sie stings t the lurs cedar see, deeder seed is." Inside, horror and anxiety swirled violently. These were her girls, hungry, tired, and finally somewhere safe, and yet even here in this palace of marble someone was making them cry. The unfairness cut deep, a numbing pain that made her feel dizzy for a moment. She reached out a shaky hand to steady herself on the edge of the counter. From the shadowed doorway behind the pantry, Vinny Russo watched the entire scene, partially hidden by the frame. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, a gold watch glinting on his wrist, and a heavy ring on his finger. His handsome face, marked by subtle tattoos peeking just above his collar, showed raw shock and tension. His jaw tightened as he observed the nanny's cold stance and the girl's tears. A violent storm erupted inside his chest, gnawing remorse mixed with a fierce, protective surge that felt almost like burning love from the very first moment he had laid eyes on Elena and the children she guarded so desperately. He had not expected this. When he offered Elena the position, he had told himself it was practical image stability, a way to project the respectable businessman side of his empire. But seeing her now thin and malnourished from years of poverty, standing protectively in front of the two frightened little girls, something inside him cracked wider. These children reminded him painfully of the one he had abandoned years ago. The guilt was consuming, tearing at him with savage intensity. How many cold October nights had Elena and these girls endured while he slept in silk sheets behind iron gates? The disparity felt absurdly cruel, violently unjust. Elena knelt down slowly, her movements careful so she would not frighten the girls further. Lily ran straight into her arms, burying her face in Elena's shoulder. Mia followed a second later, still sobbing. "It's all right, sweethearts," Elena whispered, her voice trembling but gentle. "Miss Elena is here." She stroked their hair with hands that were rough from years of scrubbing floors and stocking shelves at all hours. Her own stomach ached with hunger she had not yet satisfied that morning. She had given most of her breakfast portion to the girls again, a habit born of too many nights when there was simply not enough. The nanny huffed and turned away, muttering something about proper boundaries. Elena felt a wave of deep disorientation wash over her. This luxury kitchen, with its bright daylight and marble that reflected like mirrors, made her feel smaller than ever. She was still so powerless, so pitifully thin and sleep-deprived from years of wind-filled nights in the projects. Yet here she was being paid more in 1 week than she used to make in a month, living under the same roof as a man whose wealth seemed endless. The shift was too sudden, too confusing. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and an overwhelming burning trust that had begun the moment Vinny had looked at her with that intense protective gaze in the hallway yesterday. It was not romance. It was something deeper, a fierce attachment born of sudden safety. Someone powerful saw her misery and had chosen to shield her. The thought both comforted and terrified her. Vinny's hands clenched at his sides in the doorway. He wanted to step forward to dismiss the nanny on the spot, but he held back. Another confrontation loomed later that afternoon, a tense meeting on a South Side construction site with a rival faction trying to undercut his trucking contracts. The encounter would be bold and unexpected. Sharp words exchanged under the gray October sky, veiled threats delivered with cold smiles, the kind of power play that kept his empire intact, but left him drained. He could not show weakness now, yet watching Elena comfort the crying girls, her malnourished frame, so fragile against the opulence surrounding her, sent violent emotional conflict ripping through him. Remorse gnawed harder. He had built this wealth on streets that had once nearly destroyed people like her. What right did he have to this marble paradise while she had endured such humiliating poverty? In a quiet moment of condensed emotional stillness, Elena looked up and caught Vinny's eyes across the room. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. She saw the shock and tension on his face, the way his powerful shoulders tensed beneath the black suit. Her own eyes widened with a mix of curiosity and deepening attachment. This man who commanded respect and fear in the city had chosen to protect her and the girls. The realization brought a surge of passionate trust so intense it made her chest ache. She had gone from begging on doorsteps to standing in a kitchen worth more than everything she had ever owned, and it was because of him. The inner tearing was almost unbearable gratitude mixed with the lingering horror of her recent life. Vinny felt it too. The overwhelming surge of protective love for this destitute woman and the vulnerable children she raised burned brighter. It was paternal in its depth, a fierce responsibility that clashed violently with the ruthless man he had been forced to become. He stepped back silently, retreating down the hallway before anyone noticed him. His heart pounded with torment. He had spent years telling himself that distance kept everyone safe. Now that lie was crumbling. These girls, Lily with her quiet frailty, and Mia with her fierce loyalty, were healing something inside him he had long buried, and Elena, with her soft, timid voice and exhausted eyes, had become the unexpected mirror reflecting every wrong choice he had ever made. Later that afternoon, while Elena helped the girls pick up the scattered toys, another unfair blow landed. A phone call came from her old landlord. Even though she had already paid the overdue rent with her first advance from Vinny, the man claimed additional late fees and threatened to seize the few belongings she had left behind. Elena listened in the staff sitting room, her free hand gripping the edge of the chair until her knuckles turned white. "But I don't have anything left there," she whispered, voice polite, even in distress. When the call ended, she sat motionless, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The absurdity of it still being punished while living in this palace of wealth left her numb and disoriented. Dizziness returned, a painful wave that made the luxurious room spin. Vinny learned of the call through Mrs. Delgado. Standing alone in his study overlooking the lake, he felt the inner storm reach new heights. His remorse was now a living thing clawing at him. He made a quiet call of his own, ensuring the landlord would never trouble Elena again. The act brought no satisfaction, only deeper conflict. He was using the same power that had once kept him distant from vulnerability to now protect this woman and her children. The disparity between his world and hers grew more intense with every passing hour, marble floors and gold watches versus thin coats and wind-filled nights. As evening approached, the girls had calmed. Lily climbed into Elena's lap in the quiet staff area, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. Mia sat close by, still guarded but beginning to relax. Elena stroked Lily's hair with gentle fingers, a small tender smile breaking through her exhaustion. In that moment of stillness, Vinny passed by the open doorway again. He paused, unseen, watching the simple scene. The sight of Elena's quiet strength and the girl's growing trust struck him like a physical blow. His heart tore violently between the powerful mafia boss he had to be and the man who suddenly longed to shield these three souls from every unfair blow life had thrown at them. He turned away, the gold watch heavy on his wrist, the weight of his empire pressing down. Yet, inside the first real emotional cracks had formed deep moving fissures caused by a destitute woman's quiet dignity and two small girls who cried in his perfect kitchen. The October daylight was fading, but something new and powerful was beginning to grow in the spaces between wealth and poverty, between remorse and redemption, carrying the faint bite of approaching winter, even as occasional warmer days teased the city with memories of a milder autumn. Inside Vincent Russo's lakeside compound, the days settled into a careful rhythm that felt both comforting and strangely fragile to Elena Ramirez. She moved through the marble halls with quiet steps, her thin frame still adjusting to the abundance around her, hot meals that never ran out, soft beds that held no drafts, and lights that stayed on through the night. Yet the old humiliations refused to fade. Her body remained malnourished from years of stretching every dollar, her sleep still broken by nightmares of eviction notices and cold wind howling through cracked project windows. One afternoon, as golden light slanted through the tall kitchen windows, Elena watched Lily and Mia play cautiously on the marble floor. The toys had been picked up after the previous day's tears, but the girls moved with the hesitant energy of children who had learned that safety could vanish quickly. Lily's small cheeks still held a pallor that worried Elena deeply. The 8-year-old had been coughing more often lately, her energy fading after even gentle play. Mia, ever the protector at 9 years old, stayed close, her bright yellow dress a splash of color against the pristine white surroundings. The new temporary nanny had been replaced after Vinny's quiet intervention, but the household still carried an undercurrent of strict order. Elena noticed patterns that made her stomach tighten with growing suspicion. Lily seemed to grow weaker after drinking the special recovery shakes prepared each morning by the household's private nutrition advisor, a tall, polished man named Dr. Victor Kane who had served Vinny's circle for years. The shakes were thick, slightly bitter, and always presented with professional assurance. They build strength, Dr. Kane would say smoothly, his voice carrying the weight of authority. On the days Lily finished the entire glass, her small body would soon tremble with nausea, her face turning pale as she curled up on the soft couch in the staff sitting room. Yet on the rare mornings when Lily pushed the glass away or fell asleep before it arrived, she sat up brighter, her hazel eyes clearer, even managing a few careful steps around the sunlit atrium without coughing. Elena's heart twisted with quiet horror each time she saw the change. She said nothing at first, her voice remaining soft and polite when Dr. Kane passed through the kitchen. "Thank you for preparing it, sir," she would murmur, eyes lowered in the timid manner she had perfected while speaking to those who held power. Inside, however, anxiety churned violently. Was she imagining it? After so many years of powerless desperation, nights spent huddled with the girls under the thin American flag blanket, while wind whistled through the walls, she feared her own exhaustion was clouding her judgment. Yet the pattern-repeated shake, consumed sickness followed. Shake refused quiet improvement. The unfairness felt absurdly cruel. She had brought her girls from freezing, leaking rooms where hunger was constant, only to watch one of them weaken again in this palace of marble and wealth. Vinny observed from the edges of the household, his powerful presence felt even when he remained unseen. That same day, as he prepared to leave for a tense street confrontation on the south side, the inner tearing in his chest grew sharper. A rival faction had scheduled an unexpected meeting near an old trucking warehouse to challenge one of his legitimate construction contracts. The encounter would be bold and icy. Words exchanged under the gray October sky, eyes locked in calculated silence. Veiled warnings about territory and respect delivered with calm menace rather than open threats. Vinny, dressed in his tailored black suit, the gold watch heavy on his wrist, his tattoos hidden beneath crisp cuffs. He was wealthy beyond measure, his empire of trucking routes and building projects, shielding operations that demanded constant vigilance. Yet as he glanced toward the kitchen before departing, the sight of Elena gently wiping Lily's forehead sent a violent wave of remorse crashing through him. He remembered the child he had walked away from years earlier, terrified that fatherhood would soften the edges he needed to survive these streets. Now watching this destitute woman, still so pitifully thin, her cheeks hollow from years of sleep deprivation and cold nights, care for two vulnerable girls in his home, the guilt gnawed with savage intensity. A fierce protective love burned in his chest from the first moment he had seen her. Not romantic, but deeply paternal. A passionate attachment that clashed violently with the ruthless man he had become. How could he command respect in warehouse shadows while failing to shield the innocent under his own roof? The conflict tore at him, numbing and confusing, leaving him momentarily off balance in the grand hallway. Later that afternoon, while Vinny was away handling the tense meeting, standing firm as the rival leader questioned his expansion, with sharp probing words, trouble found the compound in a different form. A sudden, unexpected delivery van from a supposed supplier arrived at the rear gate. Mrs. Delgado accepted the packages, but one contained an unfamiliar supplement recommended by Dr. Kane for the children's vitality. Elena watched with guarded curiosity as the advisor mixed a new batch of shakes, his movements precise and confident. When Lily took a small sip and immediately grimaced, clutching her stomach, Elena felt a wave of deep disorientation wash over her. Dizziness swept through her thin body. She reached for the marble counter to steady herself, pain blooming behind her eyes. The disparity struck her violently, this gleaming kitchen with its endless resources, yet her daughter still suffered. She had endured so many humiliating days, begging for mercy from uncaring landlords, and now even in safety an invisible threat seemed to linger. That evening brought a more dramatic moment. As October twilight settled over Lake Michigan, a bold and unexpected confrontation unfolded just outside the compound's outer perimeter. A small group from the rival faction, emboldened by the afternoon's warehouse exchange, made a tense approach along the lakeside road, their vehicles slowing as they tested the boundaries with flashing lights and deliberate presence. No weapons were drawn, but the message was clear, a show of force meant to unsettle. Vinny, returning at that exact moment, stepped from his car with calm authority. He met them on the paved drive, voice low and commanding, reminding them through measured words that certain lines would not be crossed. The rivals eventually pulled away into the gathering dark, but the encounter left the air charged with suspense. Inside, the stress triggered something in Lily. The little girl, already weakened, stumbled while trying to help Mia pick up a few remaining blocks from the kitchen floor. She fell hard against the marble, scraping her knee and crying out in pain. Elena rushed to her, but it was Vinny, who had just entered through the side door, who reached them first. Without hesitation, he knelt on the polished floor in his expensive black suit, his powerful frame surprisingly gentle as he lifted Lily carefully. "Easy, little one," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. Blood welled from the scrape, and Elena's hands shook as she fetched a clean cloth. In that moment of crisis, both girls instinctively helped Lily, despite her pain, press the cloth with her small fingers while Mia fetched the first aid kit from the counter, her earlier distrust softening into quiet cooperation. Vinny felt the girl's tiny hands on his arm as he steadied the bandage. A physical healing unfolded in real time, his own tension from the street confrontation easing as their innocent trust washed over him. Yet the emotional storm inside him intensified to a violent pitch. These children, so vulnerable and trusting, were mending something broken in him with their simple presence. Remorse for his past abandonment consumed him anew, clashing with the overwhelming surge of protective love he felt for Elena and the girls she had shielded through years of poverty. He looked up at Elena, who stood nearby with tears glistening in her eyes, her voice soft and polite, even in shock. "Thank you, sir. She's never had someone so strong help her like this." Her words carried the weight of a woman who had once been utterly powerless, now overwhelmed by sudden protection. In the quiet stillness that followed as the girls calmed, and the kitchen lights cast a warm glow on the marble, Elena sat holding Lily close. The absurdity of the day tore at her inner world, unjust patterns of sickness in a place of plenty, a tense street confrontation echoing the dangers she had fled, and now this powerful man kneeling on the floor beside her daughter. Confusion and fear mingled with a burning, passionate trust that grew stronger with every passing hour. She had gone from enduring cold, wind-filled nights with nothing to her name, to being sheltered by a man whose wealth and influence seemed limitless. The shift left her dizzy with emotional intensity, her heart violently torn between lingering guardedness and an attachment so deep it felt like salvation. Vinny stood slowly, the gold ring on his finger catching the light. He excused himself to his study, but the inner conflict raged harder than ever. The rival's bold probe outside had been handled, yet the real threat he sensed now was closer, subtle, hidden in the daily routines of his own household. Watching Elena's malnourished frame comfort the girls, he felt the disparity between his world of luxury and her history of humiliating poverty like a physical wound. His remorse was no longer quiet. It tore at him with savage force, demanding he protect what he had so carelessly overlooked in his past. As night deepened over Chicago, a moment of condensed emotional stillness settled in the staff quarters. Elena tucked the girls into bed, their breathing finally even. She sat beside them for a long time, her hand resting lightly on Lily's hair. Outside the October, wind whispered against the reinforced windows, a faint reminder of the cold nights they had escaped. Yet inside Elena's chest, the turmoil swelled gratitude, anxiety, and a fierce new trust burning brightly. Vinnu, standing unseen in the hallway once more, watched the tender scene and felt his own heart crack further. The powerful mafia bossmaster of tense confrontations and vast wealth was being healed in small, profound ways by the quiet courage of a destitute woman and the innocent hands of two little girls. The suspicion had taken root. The emotional cracks were widening, and in the spaces between extreme wealth and profound poverty, something sacred and redemptive was beginning to bloom. October 2025 painted Chicago in shades of fading gold and deepening gray. The wind off Lake Michigan grew sharper each day, slipping through the cracks of memory, even inside the fortified warmth of Vincent Russo's lakeside compound. Elena Ramirez moved through the marble halls with the quiet caution of someone who still expected the floor to drop away beneath her feet. Her body remained painfully thin, cheeks hollow from years of stretching meager meals, eyes shadowed by countless sleep-deprived nights, spent huddled with Lily and Mia under their thin American flag blanket, while cold drafts whistled through the project walls. The luxury surrounding her pristine, white marble soft lighting that never flickered meals that appeared without worry only made the contrast more humiliating. She had once begged strangers for a few more days before eviction. Now she folded silk, soft towels in rooms larger than her old entire apartment. The absurdity of it left her heart in constant violent turmoil. One quiet afternoon, while the girls napped in the staff sitting area, Elena decided to organize the playroom attached to the kitchen. Toys still occasionally scattered across the polished floor, reminders of the emotional cracks forming in the household. She moved with gentle care, her movements slow from lingering malnourishment and the deep exhaustion that years of poverty had carved into her bones. As she straightened a low shelf filled with picture books and drawing supplies, her fingers brushed against something wedged behind a stack of colorful volumes. She pulled it out carefully, a small spiral notebook with a faded superhero cover, the kind of sturdy, cheerful design popular with children, its edges softened from frequent handling. Elena's breath caught. The notebook belonged to Lily. She recognized the shaky, childish handwriting on the first page, the little drawings of stick figures holding hands near what looked like Navy Pier the Ferris wheel sketched with wobbly lines, a simple boat on the water, memories of a rare, happy outing Elena had scraped together months earlier with saved coins. Her hands began to tremble as she turned the pages. The entries were dated over the past weeks, written in moments when Lily felt strong enough to hold a pencil. Today the thick drink made my tummy hurt again. Doctor said it helps, but it feels bad. I didn't tell Mama because she looks so tired. Miss Elena is nice. She lets us play when no one is watching. I wish we could stay here forever, but I'm scared something bad will happen. I dreamed about Navy Pier again. The big wheel and lights. Mama smiled that day, even when we only had one ice cream to share. Page after page revealed a little girl's quiet confusion and pain, the same pattern Elena had begun to notice with the special recovery shakes. Lily documented every wave of nausea, every brighter day when she skipped the drink, every fearful thought about becoming sick again in this beautiful place. Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks as she read. The notebook was a small, heartbreaking record of suffering hidden behind polite smiles and grateful whispers. Horror flooded her chest, followed by a wave of anxiety so intense it made the luxurious room spin. She gripped the shelf for balance, numbness spreading through her limbs, a sharp pain blooming behind her eyes. How had she not seen the full extent? She had brought her daughter from freezing, wind-filled nights of hunger, only to watch her weaken again under this roof of endless wealth. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, Elena sat on the soft rug amid the scattered toys, the notebook pressed to her chest. The disparity tore at her violently. Here in a mansion where one man's decisions shaped entire neighborhoods, her child still documented quiet misery. Elena felt desperately powerless once more. Yet a fierce, burning curiosity stirred beneath the fear. Something was wrong with those shakes. Dr. Kane prepared them with such calm authority. She remembered his polished smile, the way he dismissed any gentle questions with professional reassurance. Suspicion, once a quiet whisper, now roared inside her. She hid the notebook in her Yenisa, you know. Dr. Kane entered the playroom carrying a fresh tray with the afternoon shake. His expression remained smooth, but Elena caught a flicker in his eyes when he noticed the slightly disturbed shelf. The girls need their nutrients, he said evenly. Elena nodded, her voice, soft, timid, and polite as always when addressing someone older and powerful. Yes, sir. Thank you for taking such care. Inside, however, her heart raged with violent conflict, gratitude for the shelter Vinny had provided clashing with a growing dread that threatened the fragile safety she had found. Vinny Russo returned to the compound later that evening, after another tense, unexpected street confrontation on the south side. A rival faction had arranged a bold meeting near one of his trucking depots, their representatives arriving with calculated smiles and probing questions about expanding routes. The exchange had been icy words chosen like weapons, veiled challenges delivered under the October sky, without a single raised voice or drawn weapon, yet the air had crackled with danger. Vinny had stood firm, his powerful frame commanding respect, the gold watch and ring on his hand symbols of the empire he had built from the same streets that once tried to break him. He had diffused the situation with calm authority, but the encounter left him drained, his mind turning inevitably toward the quiet woman and two little girls now living under his roof. As he passed the staff quarters, he heard soft voices. Elena sat with Lily and Mia, the notebook now safely tucked away, reading them a simple story from one of the picture books. The girls leaned against her, their small bodies finally relaxing in the warmth and safety that still felt like a dream. Lily's voice was quiet as she interrupted. Miss Elena, do you think we'll get sick here? Like before, Elena stroked her hair gently, her reply soft and reassuring, though her own heart twisted with fresh torment. Vinny paused in the hallway, unseen, his broad shoulders tensing beneath the black suit. The scene struck him like a physical blow. These children, Lily with her fragile health and Mia with her protective fierceness, were beginning to trust this place, trust him. Yet Elena's thin, malnourished frame told the story of years of humiliating poverty, nights of cold wind cutting through thin walls, days of choosing which child would eat the last bite, constant fear of eviction that had left her sleep-deprived and broken in spirit. The wealth around him, marble that gleamed under soft lights, views of the lake worth more than entire city blocks on the south side, felt suddenly obscene in its intensity. His remorse gnawed deeper than ever, a violent emotional storm that left him nearly breathless. Then came the shocking revelation that had been building in quiet flashes. Earlier that week, while reviewing old personnel files for security reasons, Vinny had come across a faded photograph from years ago, a south side gathering where he had briefly known a woman whose face now haunted him with new clarity. The dates, the location, the quiet conversations he had once dismissed as fleeting. A cold wave of realization crashed over him as he connected the timeline with Lily's age. Her hazel eyes that carried an echo of his own family line. The way Elena had arrived carrying the weight of single motherhood from the exact neighborhood where he had walked away to protect his empire. Lily was his biological daughter, the child he had abandoned out of fear that fatherhood would make him vulnerable to the very rivals he faced today. The truth hit him with extreme psychological shock. He stood frozen in his study afterward, hands gripping the edge of his massive desk, the luxurious room blurring around him. Guilt consumed him like fire, violent tearing conflict between the powerful man who had built walls of wealth and isolation, and the father who had unknowingly left his own blood to endure the same poverty and cold winds he had escaped. How many times had he told himself distance kept everyone safe? Now that lie lay shattered. The protective love he had felt for Elena from the first moment, passionate, intense, and deeply paternal, ignited into something fiercer, a burning attachment mixed with overwhelming remorse. He wanted to shield her and the girls from every unjust blow life had dealt them, yet he was the one who had helped create the circumstances through his absence. That night brought another absurdly unfair blow for Elena. A message arrived from her old neighborhood. Contacts her former landlord had somehow learned of her new employment, and was demanding additional fabricated fees for damages to the old room, threatening to spread rumors that could affect her. References. Elena read the message in the quiet of her quarters, her hands shaking so badly the phone nearly slipped. She felt dizzy again, numbness spreading as the old powerlessness returned in a rush. Even here in this palace of safety, the world outside still reached in to humiliate her. Tears fell silently as she sat in stillness, the weight of years of misery pressing down. She had endured so much, thin, exhausted, guarding two small girls through nights, when the wind felt like it would carry them away, only to face new cruelties while marble and wealth surrounded her. Vinny learned of the threat through discreet channels. The inner tearing in his heart reached a new savage intensity. He handled the matter quietly, ensuring the landlord would never trouble her again, but the act only deepened his torment. He was using the same power that had once kept him distant to now protect the woman and children who were healing him in ways he had never imagined. In a quiet moment later that evening, he watched from afar as Elena tucked the girls in, Lily clutching a small drawing of Navy Pier she had made, The sight filled him with a fierce, overwhelming surge of responsibility and love, paternal, protective, and burning with the need to make amends for the past he had only just fully understood. Elena, unaware of the biological truth building like a storm, felt her own trust and attachment deepening with every act of quiet protection. From initial suspicion about the household routines, she now moved toward a passionate, intense reliance on the safety Vinny provided. Yet the notebook burned in her pocket like a secret, and the patterns with the shakes filled her with growing dread. Her heart was violently torn, gratitude for the powerful man who had rescued her from absolute poverty clashing with fear of hidden dangers in this new world. As October winds continued to whisper against the reinforced windows, the household settled into uneasy quiet. The notebook had been discovered. The biological revelation hovered just beneath the surface, ready to shatter everything. And in the spaces between extreme wealth and profound, humiliating poverty, the emotional cracks widened, further deep-moving fissures that would soon demand truth, courage, and the slow, painful healing of long-buried wounds. The Chicago wind growing colder and more insistent, as it swept off Lake Michigan, rattling the reinforced windows of Vincent Russo's lakeside compound like distant warnings. Inside the marble fortress, the days carried a fragile surface calm that masked deepening undercurrents. Elena Ramirez continued her duties with the same soft, timid politeness that had become her shield, yet her thin, malnourished body still bore the marks of years of extreme poverty. She remained sleep-deprived from old habits of waking at every strange noise, her cheeks hollow, her frame so fragile that even the simplest tasks sometimes left her dizzy and off balance. The luxury around her only sharpened the humiliation. She folded towels worth more than her old monthly rent in rooms where the air itself smelled of quiet wealth, while memories of begging landlords and sharing one thin American flag blanket with Lily and Mia on freezing nights refused to fade. The small spiral notebook she had discovered burned like a secret in her apron pocket. Lily's shaky handwriting and simple drawings haunted her. Each entry confirmed the troubling pattern. The special recovery shakes prepared by Dr. Victor Kane left the little girl pale and nauseous, while days without them brought small bursts of color to her cheeks and steadier breathing. Elena's suspicion had grown into a quiet, gnawing dread. She felt desperate and powerless once more. A woman who had escaped one form of misery, only to sense another hidden within these marble walls. Yet alongside the fear came a burning curiosity and an ever-deepening attachment to the man who had offered them shelter. From the first moment Vinny had looked at her with that intense, protective gaze, she had felt an overwhelming trust, passionate and paternal in nature, taking root in her heart. He had rescued her from absolute poverty, and that knowledge both comforted and terrified her. Driven by the need to protect Lily, Elena began her own secret investigation during quiet moments when the household routine allowed. She waited until Dr. Kane left for his daily afternoon walk along the lakeside path, a habit as precise as his preparation of the shakes. Her hands trembled as she slipped into the small medical suite adjacent to the playroom, a pristine space with locked cabinets and a humming refrigerator that spoke of the compound's endless resources. The disparity struck her violently again. This room alone, with its gleaming equipment and organized supplies, could have housed her entire old project apartment and still had space left over. She felt a wave of numbness and pain as she worked her malnourished body, protesting the tension. She found Dr. Kane's personal blender cup left in the sink, unusual as he normally cleaned it immediately with meticulous care. Leaning closer, she caught a faint, bitter chemical scent that turned her stomach. Horror flooded her. With shaking fingers, she took several photographs using her old phone, then carefully collected a small sample of the residue. With a cotton swab sealing it in a plastic bag, she tucked into her pocket beside Lily's notebook. The act left her dizzy with disorientation, shock at her own boldness, fear of what she might discover, and a confusing surge of guilt for doubting the very household that had given her and the girl's safety. That same afternoon, another absurdly unfair blow landed. A courier arrived with official-looking papers from her former neighborhood. Despite Vinny's quiet intervention, an old debt collector, someone from her past life of scraping by, had resurfaced with fabricated claims of unpaid utility bills from the leaking project apartment. The amount was inflated and unreasonable, the letter threatening to garnish any future wages and damage her reputation. Elena read it in the staff quarters, her hands shaking so badly the paper fluttered. She felt utterly powerless again, a wave of anxiety and humiliation crashing over her. Tears stung her eyes as she sat in a moment of condensed emotional stillness, the luxurious surroundings mocking her continued misery. How could the outside world still reach in to torment her when she was finally sheltered? The inner tearing was violent gratitude for Vinny's protection, clashing with the numbing fear that her past poverty would never truly release her. Vinny Russo, unaware of Elena's secret actions, faced his own escalating tensions that day. A bold and unexpected street confrontation unfolded near one of his Southside construction sites. Rival faction representatives arrived without warning, their vehicles pulling up in a calculated show of presence during a routine site inspection. The meeting took place under the gray October sky, amid half-built scaffolding and rumbling trucks. Words were exchanged with icy precision, no raised voices, no physical threats, but the implications were sharp questions about delayed shipments, veiled suggestions that Vinny's expansion was overreaching, and subtle reminders of old alliances that could shift. Vinny stood tall in his tailored black suit gold watch, catching the weak sunlight, his voice calm and commanding as he reasserted control. The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left a charged atmosphere and deepened his vigilance. Returning to the compound, Vinny felt the inner storm raging harder than ever. His remorse for the biological truth he now carried, that Lily was his own daughter, abandoned years ago out of fear, gnawed at him with savage intensity. Every glimpse of Elena's thin frame and the girl's innocent trust sent violent emotional conflict tearing through his chest. He was a wealthy, powerful man who commanded respect on the streets, yet he had failed the most vulnerable in his own bloodline. The protective love he felt for Elena, deep, paternal, and burning from the first moment, intensified into a fierce responsibility that clashed with the ruthless empire builder he had become. How could marble floors and lake views coexist with the memory of cold winds that had once threatened his own child? In the evening, Elena slipped away briefly to contact her cousin Marcus, a young pharmacology student at a local university. She met him at a quiet coffee shop near campus, her voice soft and trembling as she handed him the sealed sample. "I can't explain everything yet," she whispered, "but a child's health may depend on it. Please, tell me what is in this." Marcus studied her exhausted face for a long moment before agreeing to test the residue discreetly. Elena returned to the compound with her heart pounding, a mix of heightened curiosity and deep anxiety making her steps unsteady. Vinny, meanwhile, began his own discreet inquiries using trusted street contacts. The biological revelation had shaken him to his core, prompting him to examine Dr. Kane's long service more closely. He discovered encrypted logs and unusual supply orders that raised questions. In the privacy of his study, surrounded by symbols of his vast wealth, dark wood paneling, expensive art, and views of the glittering lake, he felt extreme psychological shock as pieces began to align. The shakes, the timing of Lily's symptoms, the advisor's smooth authority, all of it suggested something deliberate and hidden. His remorse turned violent, tearing at him with fresh force. He had brought this household danger under his roof, while trying to protect his empire from external rivals. The contrast between his power on the streets and his failure to shield his own daughter left him numb and off balance. Later that night, another unreasonable event struck Elena. A late phone call from an old acquaintance in the projects brought news that her former landlord was spreading rumors about her sudden disappearance, with the children implying neglect. The lies were cruel and baseless, yet they stung with humiliating force. Elena sat alone in her quarters afterward, the luxurious silence of the compound pressing in. She felt dizzy again, a wave of confusion and pain washing over her as the old powerlessness returned. She had endured so many cold, wind-filled nights with nothing, and even now, protected by a powerful man's wealth, the world tried to drag her back down. Tears fell quietly in a moment of deep emotional stillness. Yet through the torment, her trust in Vinny burned brighter, an intense, passionate attachment born of his quiet rescues and the safety he provided without demand. Vinny learned of the rumors through his network and handled them swiftly, ensuring they would not spread further. The act only deepened his inner conflict. Standing alone in the grand hallway later, he watched Elena tuck the girls into bed through a partially open door. Lily clutched her small notebook, drawing Mia resting protectively nearby. The sight filled him with overwhelming paternal love and gnawing remorse. He had once chosen power over vulnerability. Now that choice haunted him as he witnessed the quiet strength of a destitute woman who had protected his daughter through years of misery. Elena, unaware of Vinny's full knowledge, felt her own heart violently torn. Suspicion about the shakes had driven her to investigate, yet her growing trust in the man who had rescued her from poverty created a confusing, numbing storm inside. She was no longer the powerless woman begging on doorsteps, yet she remained guarded and fearful of hidden dangers. In the quiet of the night, as October winds whispered outside, both Elena and Vinny stood on the edge of revelations that would soon shatter the fragile peace of the household. The proof was being gathered in secret. The biological truth simmered beneath the surface, and the emotional tearing, deep moving and increasingly intense, drew them all toward a confrontation that would test every bond forming in the spaces between extreme wealth and profound poverty. October 2025 drew toward its close, the Chicago wind now carrying a sharper bite as it swept across Lake Michigan and rattled the tall windows of Vincent Russo's lakeside compound. The marble halls, once a symbol of safety and luxury, had begun to feel charged with unspoken tension. Elena Ramirez moved through her daily tasks with a quiet grace that masked the storm inside her. Her body remained painfully thin and malnourished, the legacy of years spent stretching every scrap of food and enduring cold, wind-filled nights in the projects where sleep came in fitful bursts. Even here, surrounded by endless wealth, pristine white marble that gleamed under soft lighting, meals that appeared without effort, and rooms warmer than any she had known, she still felt the humiliating weight of her past poverty pressing down. The contrast left her heart in constant, violent turmoil. The secret sample she had collected from Dr. Victor Kane's blender had been tested by her cousin Marcus. Late one evening, he called with a trembling voice. The residue contained a rare plant-based toxin capable of mimicking chronic illness, fatigue, nausea, and gradual weakening, especially dangerous for a child. Elena listened in the privacy of her quarters, her free hand gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Horror flooded her. She felt dizzy, a wave of numbness and pain sweeping through her as the luxurious room seemed to tilt. Her voice, when she finally spoke, remained soft and polite. "Thank you, Marcus. I will be careful." But inside, anxiety and fear tore at her with savage force. The very man tasked with the girl's health was harming Lily. The unfairness was absurdly cruel. She had escaped one nightmare of powerlessness, only to discover another hidden within this palace of marble and money. That same night brought another unreasonable blow. A message arrived from an old acquaintance in the South Side. Elena's former landlord had filed a formal complaint with local authorities, falsely claiming she had abandoned the apartment with unpaid damages and implying neglect of the damages. Children. The accusation was baseless and malicious, yet it threatened to drag her name through the mud just as she was finding stability. Elena sat alone after the girls were asleep, tears slipping silently down her cheeks in a moment of condensed emotional stillness. She felt desperately powerless again, her thin frame trembling. How many times had life punished her for simply trying to survive? The inner tearing was violent gratitude for the shelter Vinny provided, clashing with the numbing fear that her past would never stop reaching for her and the girls. Vinny Russo, unaware of Elena's discovery, but deeply troubled by his own growing suspicions about Dr. Kane, faced escalating pressures from the outside world. The next morning, a bold and unexpected street confrontation unfolded near one of his legitimate trucking depots on the South Side. Rival faction members arrived without warning during a routine loading operation, their presence deliberate and calculated. They blocked access temporarily, forcing a tense standoff under the gray October sky. Words were exchanged with icy precision, questions about delayed shipments, veiled suggestions that Vinny's control was slipping, and subtle reminders of old balances that needed settling. Vinny stepped forward in his tailored black suit, gold watch glinting, his voice calm, yet commanding as he reasserted authority, without raising his tone. The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left the air thick with suspense, and reminded him how quickly his empire could be tested. Returning to the compound, Vinny's inner torment reached new depths. The biological revelation that Lily was his own daughter, abandoned years ago out of fear that fatherhood would weaken him, consumed him with gnawing remorse. Every glimpse of Elena's exhausted, malnourished frame and the girl's innocent trust sent violent emotional conflict ripping through his chest. He was a powerful man who commanded respect on the streets, yet he had failed the most vulnerable under his own roof. The protective, paternal love he felt for Elena burned brighter and more intensely from the first moment he had seen her, a fierce attachment that clashed violently with the ruthless figure he had built to survive. How could he protect his empire from external rivals while a hidden threat existed inside his own home? That afternoon, the confrontation build reached its peak. Vinny arranged a private meeting with Dr. Kane in the medical suite, his powerful frame filling the doorway as he entered. "We need to talk about the girl's care," he said, voice steady but eyes sharp. Dr. Kane remained polished and confident, explaining the shakes as necessary supplements with smooth authority. Vinny pressed gently, citing Lily's fluctuating symptoms. The doctor deflected with professional reassurance, but something in his eyes flickered suspicion, perhaps, or calculation. The exchange was tense, words chosen carefully, the air thick with unspoken questions. Vinny felt extreme psychological shock as he sensed the man's composure slip for a fraction of a second. His remorse intensified, tearing at him violently. He had trusted this advisor for years, yet now every instinct screamed that something was deeply wrong. Meanwhile, Elena's own suspicions drove her to greater boldness. She waited until Dr. Kane left for his afternoon walk, then slipped back into the medical suite. Her hands shook as she examined the locked cabinet where he stored his specialized supplies. Using a simple hairpin she had learned to use in her old life of scraping by, she managed to open it. Inside were unmarked containers and a small journal. She photographed several pages quickly, her heart pounding with a mix of horror and heightened curiosity. The entries, though coded, suggested deliberate dosage adjustments tied to Lily's symptoms. Shock and confusion left her dizzy and off balance. She had to steady herself against the cabinet as numbness spread through her limbs. The disparity hit her again with brutal force. This room of clinical precision and wealth, while she had once endured cold nights with nothing to feed her children. As she slipped out, another unjust event struck. Mrs. Delgado appeared unexpectedly in the hallway, her expression stern. "Mr. Russo values discretion," she said flatly. "You were seen near the medical suite earlier. Is there something you wish to discuss?" Elena's voice came out soft and timid, polite as always. "I was only checking on cleaning supplies, ma'am. I'm sorry if I overstepped." Inside, however, fear and anxiety raged. The old powerlessness returned in a rush. She was still the destitute woman who could be dismissed at any moment despite the safety Vinny had offered. Tears threatened as she returned to her duties, the inner world violently torn between overwhelming trust in her rescuer and the growing dread of hidden danger. Vinny, sensing the household tension, sought Elena out later that evening. He found her in the quiet staff sitting area, folding laundry with trembling hands. The moment he entered, the air shifted. Elena looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of guarded curiosity and deepening attachment. "Mr. Russo," she whispered softly, "is everything all right?" Vinny's powerful frame tensed. He wanted to tell her everything, his suspicions about Dr. Kane, the biological truth about Lily, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he spoke carefully. "I want you and the girls to feel safe here. If anything seems wrong, you can come to me." His voice carried the weight of a man whose heart was being torn apart by remorse and fierce paternal love. In that quiet moment of condensed emotional stillness, their eyes met. Elena felt an overwhelming surge of trust, passionate and intense, burning from the first moment he had shown her kindness. She had gone from begging on doorsteps, thin and powerless, to being protected by a wealthy, powerful man whose quiet strength made her feel seen for the first time in years. The shift left her confused and deeply moved, her heart violently torn between fear of the unknown and gratitude that bordered on reverence. Vinny, for his part, felt the inner conflict reach a fever pitch. The protective love he felt for this destitute woman and the two little girls, especially Lily, his own blood clashed violently with the guilt of his past abandonment. He had faced rivals on the streets with calm authority. Yet here in his own home he struggled with the possibility that he had brought danger to his daughter's doorstep. The remorse was consuming, numbing, and savage in its intensity. As night fell over the compound, another absurdly unfair event tested Elena. A late-night call brought news that the false complaint from her old landlord had reached a local agency, triggering a routine welfare check threat. She sat in the darkness afterward, the luxurious silence of the compound pressing in like a weight. Dizziness returned, pain and numbness making the room spin. She had endured so many humiliating nights of cold wind and hunger, and even now, the outside world tried to strip away her fragile safety. Vinny, pacing his study, felt the same violent tearing. The first major twist was building the growing certainty that Dr. Kane was not what he seemed, combined with the biological truth he carried like a hidden wound. The household stood on the edge of revelation. Elena's trust in him burned brighter, while his paternal love and remorse deepened with every passing hour. The marble walls that symbolized his wealth now felt like a cage for the emotional storm raging inside. The confrontation was building. Secrets were pressing toward the surface. And in the spaces between extreme poverty and vast power, hearts were being torn apart in ways that would soon demand courage, truth, and the healing only forgiveness and protection could bring. The Chicago wind howling off Lake Michigan with renewed fury, as if the city itself sensed the storm gathering inside Vincent Russo's lakeside compound. The marble halls, once a sanctuary of polished luxury, now felt heavy with unspoken dread. Elena Ramirez moved through them like a shadow of her former self, still painfully thin and malnourished. From years of desperate poverty, her body weakened by endless nights of cold wind, cutting through cracked project walls and sleep stolen, in fragments, even surrounded by unimaginable wealth, gleaming white marble that reflected every light meals prepared without thought, and rooms warmer than any she had known. She carried the humiliating weight of her past. The disparity tore at her constantly. She had once begged landlords not to evict her, and the girls sharing one thin American flag blanket on freezing floors. And now she folded silk linens in a mansion where one man's decisions could reshape lives. The secret evidence she had gathered weighed on her like lead. Lily's notebook and the test results from the shake residue pointed to something deliberate and cruel. Elena's suspicion had hardened into quiet horror. She felt desperate and powerless again, a woman who had escaped one nightmare only to sense another closing in. Yet her trust in Vinny had grown into a passionate, burning attachment, deeply paternal and protective, igniting from the first moment he had offered them shelter. That trust both anchored and terrified her, leaving her heart violently torn between fear of hidden danger and overwhelming gratitude for the powerful man who had rescued her from absolute misery. The chaos erupted on a cold gray afternoon. Vinny had just returned from another tense street confrontation on the south side. A rival faction had staged a bold, unexpected approach at one of his construction sites, their representatives arriving during a critical inspection. The meeting unfolded under the October sky with calculated precision, sharp questions about supply lines, veiled warnings about shifting alliances, and icy reminders of past balances. Vinny had stood firm in his tailored black suit, gold watch, catching the weak light, his voice steady and commanding as he reasserted control without escalation. The rivals withdrew, but the encounter left the air charged with suspense and reminded him how fragile power could be. As he entered the compound, a sudden commotion shattered the quiet. A delivery van, supposedly from a trusted supplier but clearly tampered with, crashed through the outer perimeter gate in a calculated breach. Alarms blared. Security rushed forward, but in the confusion, rival operatives on foot slipped closer, creating a chaotic standoff on the driveway. No shots were fired, but the tension was electric voices, raised in sharp commands, bodies positioned with deliberate threat, the rivals testing boundaries with bold presence. Vinny moved swiftly, stepping into the fray with calm authority, his powerful frame commanding the scene as he ordered his men to hold position, and confronted the intruders with measured words. The rivals eventually retreated into the gathering dusk, but the breach had created dangerous openings. In the midst of the chaos, Lily, frightened by the raised voices and unfamiliar commotion, ran from the playroom toward the main hallway, her small pink dress fluttering. Mia followed close behind in her yellow dress, trying to pull her friend back. Dr. Kane, who had been in the medical suite, emerged at that exact moment. In the confusion, he moved toward Lily with unusual urgency, a syringe-like device partially visible in his hand. Elena, rushing after the girls, saw the scene unfold in horrifying slow motion. Elena cried, her voice breaking with raw fear. She lunged forward, but the chaos made movement difficult. Vinny, turning from the driveway confrontation, spotted the danger. His heart stopped. In that split second, everything crystallized. He sprinted across the marble floor, his black suit jacket flying open, and threw himself between Dr. Kane and Lily, just as the advisor reached for the child. Vinny took the full impact of the struggle, a sharp blow striking his side. Pain exploded through him, but he shielded Lily with his body, scooping her up protectively, as security finally swarmed in and forced the remaining intruders back. The compound descended into controlled pandemonium. Elena reached them moments later, her thin legs nearly giving way. She dropped to her knees beside Vinny and Lily, her hands shaking violently as she checked the little girl for injury. Lily was crying, but unharmed, clinging to Vinny's suit with small fists. Mia stood nearby, wide-eyed and trembling. Elena's world spun with dizziness and numbness. Horror and anxiety crashed over her in waves. She had nearly lost her daughter in the very place meant to keep them safe. Her voice came out soft and broken, polite even in terror. "Mr. Russo. Are you hurt, Lily, baby? Are you okay?" Vinny, breathing hard, felt blood seeping from a deep bruise along his ribs where he had taken the blow meant for Lily. But the real shock came when emergency medical staff from the compound's private team arrived and insisted on an immediate field check standard protocol after any breach. A quick blood draw was taken from both Vinny and Lily to rule out contamination or injury. As the results processed on a portable device, Vinny held Lily close his powerful arms, gentle despite the pain. The little girl looked up at him with tear-filled hazel eyes that suddenly seemed achingly familiar. The device beeped. The technician's face paled. "Sir, the genetic markers. There is a clear parental match. Lily, she is your biological daughter." The words hit Vinny like a gunshot. Extreme psychological shock ripped through him, violent and numbing. He stared at Lily, the truth he had suspected now confirmed in the middle of chaos. This frail 8-year-old, his own blood, had been living in poverty because he had walked away years ago, terrified that fatherhood would make him vulnerable to the very rivals who had just breached his gates. Remorse consumed him with savage intensity, tearing his heart apart. He had built an empire of wealth and power, marble floors and lake views, while his daughter endured cold winds and hunger with her mother. The protective love he felt for Elena and the girls, burning and paternal from the first moment, exploded into something fiercer, a fierce responsibility mixed with overwhelming guilt. Elena, still kneeling, felt the world tilt violently. She heard the words but struggled to process them. Confusion and deep disorientation washed over her dizziness, making her sway. Her thin, malnourished body trembled as pain bloomed behind her eyes. Lily, her daughter, was Vinny's child. The powerful man who had rescued them from absolute poverty was the father she had never known. Shock left her numb, her inner world violently torn between horror at the danger they had just escaped and an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment. She had gone from begging on doorsteps, powerless and humiliated, to being protected by the very man whose blood ran in her daughter's veins. The revelation was too much. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out a shaky hand to touch Vinny's arm. "Mr. Russo," she whispered, voice soft and timid. "Is it true?" Vinny could barely speak. He held Lily closer, the little girl resting her head against his chest, instinctively trusting the man who had just shielded her. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness amid the fading chaos, the disparity between his world and Elena's felt brutally vivid. He had faced rivals on the streets with calm authority, yet here, kneeling on marble, worth more than entire neighborhoods, he confronted the consequences of his past choices. His remorse was now a living fire, gnawing, violent, and all-consuming. How could he have left his own child to suffer the same poverty he had escaped? The paternal love he felt for Elena, deep, protective, and passionate, intensified until it burned like a beacon, compelling him to shield her and the girls, no matter the cost. Security reports confirmed the breach had been orchestrated with inside help, pointing even more strongly toward Dr. Kane, who had slipped away in the confusion but would not remain free for long. Another absurdly unfair blow landed for Elena when a follow-up message arrived from the old landlord's associates, exploiting the chaos to renew their false claims. She read it later in the quiet staff area, her hands shaking, feeling once again the humiliating powerlessness of her past life. The inner tearing was almost unbearable gratitude for Vinny's sacrifice, clashing with the numbing fear that danger still circled them. Vinny, despite his injury, refused to rest. He paced the hallway later that evening, pain radiating from his side, but the greater wound was in his heart. The shocking blood revelation had shattered his carefully built walls. Lily was his daughter. The child he had abandoned to protect his empire had been suffering under his own roof. The violent conflict inside him left him nearly breathless remorse for the past, fierce love for the present, and a burning determination to make things right. Elena sat with the girls in a quiet room, holding Lily close while Mia leaned against her. In the stillness, she felt an overwhelming attachment to Vinny deepen. He had thrown himself into danger for her daughter. His daughter. The mindset of a woman who had once been desperately poor, now shifted dramatically, suddenly protected, valued, and connected to a powerful man in ways she could never have imagined. It left her confused, fearful, yet profoundly moved, tears falling silently as the emotional storm raged within. As night deepened over the compound, the first major twist had landed with devastating force. The blood revelation had changed everything. Hearts were torn open wider than ever. Vinny's remorse and paternal love clashing violently with his powerful world. Elena's trust and attachment burning brighter, amid lingering horror and shock. The chaos on the driveway had revealed far more than a security breach. It had revealed family. And in the spaces between extreme wealth and profound poverty, the path toward healing had become both clearer and infinitely more painful. The Chicago wind, now a relentless howl off Lake Michigan, that seemed to echo the turmoil inside Vincent Russo's lakeside compound. The marble fortress, once a symbol of unassailable power and luxury, felt fractured by revelations and lingering threats. Elena Ramirez moved through the grand halls like a woman walking a tightrope, her body still painfully thin and malnourished from years of desperate poverty, her frame weakened by endless sleep-deprived nights, spent guarding Lily and Mia under a single thin American flag blanket while cold drafts whistled through cracked project walls. Even in this world of gleaming white marble, endless hot meals, and soft lighting that never failed, the humiliating weight of her past clung to her. She had once begged for mercy from cruel landlords. Now she folded expensive linens while carrying secrets that threatened to shatter the fragile safety she had found. The blood revelation from the previous day's chaos had left Elena in a state of deep disorientation. Lily, her precious daughter, was Vincent's biological child. The powerful man who had rescued them from absolute poverty was the father she had never known. The knowledge brought overwhelming trust and attachment, passionate and intense, burning from the first moment Vinny had shown them kindness. Yet it also stirred fresh fear and confusion. She felt dizzy at times, numbness spreading through her limbs as the disparity between her old life of cold winds and hunger, and this new reality of marble and protection, left her heart violently torn. Dr. Victor Kane had vanished after the breach, but the danger had not ended. Late that same evening, a second bold and unexpected street confrontation erupted. Rival faction members, emboldened by the earlier chaos, staged another calculated approach near one of Vinny's Southside trucking depots. Their vehicles slowed deliberately along the access road, forcing Vinny, still bruised from shielding Lily, to meet them under the dim October streetlights. The exchange was tense and icy. Sharp questions about weakened security veiled suggestions that his empire was cracking, and subtle threats implying they knew more about his personal vulnerabilities than they should. Vinny stood firm in his tailored black suit, gold watch catching the faint light, his voice calm and commanding as he dismissed their probes without escalation. The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left a heavy sense of suspense, and confirmed that someone inside his circle was feeding information outward. Returning to the compound, Vinny's inner torment reached a savage new peak. The blood revelation had confirmed Lily as his daughter, and the guilt gnawed at him with unrelenting force. He had abandoned his own child years ago, out of fear that fatherhood would soften the edges he needed to survive these streets. Now that same child had nearly been harmed under his roof. His remorse was consuming a violent emotional storm that left him numb and off balance, despite his vast wealth. The paternal love he felt for Elena, deep, protective, and burning passionately from the first moment, clashed fiercely with the ruthless man he had become. How could marble floors and lake views coexist with the memory of the cold, wind-filled nights his own daughter had endured? The second bold, new, shocking twist struck in the dead of night. A frantic knock sounded at Elena's door. Mia, Lily's loyal 9-year-old best friend, stood there in her yellow nightdress, eyes wide with terror. "Miss Elena," he took Lily. "The doctor man. He said he needed to give her medicine right away, because of what happened today." But Lily didn't want to go. He made her. Elena's world collapsed. Horror and anxiety surged through her so violently that she nearly lost her balance, grabbing the doorframe as dizziness and pain exploded behind her eyes. She felt numb, disoriented, the luxurious surroundings blurring around her. Lily, her daughter, Vinny's daughter, had been taken. The betrayal cut deeper than any eviction notice or false accusation she had ever faced. She had brought her girls from freezing project rooms only to have hidden evil reach them here, in the heart of safety. Elena ran toward the medical suite, her thin legs, trembling voice breaking in soft, desperate whispers. "Lily, please, no." Vinny, alerted by security alarms, met her in the hallway, his powerful frame tense despite the bruise on his side. Together they discovered the truth. Dr. Kane had used the earlier chaos as cover to isolate Lily, but the real double cross was far worse. Kane had been grooming Mia for weeks with small gifts and false promises of helping her impoverished family. He had convinced the trusting 9-year-old that Vinny was dangerous, and that he alone could save Lily. Mia, torn between loyalty to her best friend and the fear planted by Kane, had hesitated too long before running to Elena. The full betrayal unfolded in a midnight warehouse on the south side, Kane's chosen location for a final confrontation. He had taken Lily there using the girl as leverage, while contacting Vinny with a cold demand step down from key Empire assets, or the child would suffer a natural setback that no one could trace. Vinny, Elena, and a small, trusted team raced to the warehouse in the dead of night. The scene was tense and cinematic under dim, industrial lights. Kane stood behind a makeshift barrier. Lily held gently but firmly, her small pink dress rumpled, eyes wide with fear. Vinny stepped forward alone at first, his black suit rumpled from the earlier chaos gold watch and ring glinting. "Let her go, Victor. This ends now." His voice was steady, but inside violent conflict raged remorse for trusting Kane for years, savage guilt over abandoning Lily, and a fierce paternal love that burned hotter than any Empire loyalty. Kane's mask finally slipped. He revealed the double cross. With cold calculation, he had poisoned Lily slowly, not only for personal gain, but because he knew she was Vinny's heir. Softening the boss with fatherhood would weaken the entire organization. He had used Mia as leverage, feeding her fears about powerful men like Vinny, who destroyed families mirroring the gangs that had hurt her own father. The betrayal was complete, and shocking. Kane had played on everyone's vulnerabilities to seize control. Mia, who had been brought along as further insurance, suddenly broke. Witnessing Vinny risk everything, walking unarmed into the warehouse, offering himself in exchange for Lily taking a brutal but non-lethal beating from Kane's hidden associate to buy time, the little girl saw the truth. Vinny was not the monster Kane had described. In an emotional turning point, Mia grabbed a heavy baseball bat, a childhood keepsake Vinny had once shown the girls, and swung it with all her small strength at Kane's knee, creating the distraction needed for Vinny to reach Lily. Elena, waiting at the perimeter with security, felt every second like a lifetime. When Vinny emerged carrying Lily with Mia running beside them, relief crashed over her. But the inner tearing remained violent. She had nearly lost everything again. Her thin, malnourished frame trembled with exhaustion and shock as she took Lily into her arms, whispering soft, polite reassurances even as tears streamed down her face. The mindset of a woman once desperately poor, suddenly protected and loved by a powerful man whose blood ran in her daughter's veins, left her profoundly moved and deeply confused. The attachment burned brighter than ever. In the quiet ride back to the compound, a moment of condensed emotional stillness settled. Lily rested against Vinny's chest, Mia leaning against Elena. Vinny's heart was torn apart by the double cross. He had faced rivals on the streets with calm authority, yet the greatest betrayal had come from within. His remorse for the past abandonment now mixed with fierce determination to protect his family. The paternal love he felt for Elena and the girls was no longer just protective. It was redemptive, a burning force that challenged every ruthless choice he had ever made. Another absurdly unfair event struck Elena, even as they reached safety. A final message from the old landlord's network arrived, exploiting the night's chaos to renew false claims and threaten further harassment. She read it in the quiet of the car, feeling once more the humiliating powerlessness of her past life. The inner storm was numbing and confusing gratitude for Vinny's sacrifice, clashing with the fear that the outside world would never stop trying to drag her back down. Vinny, holding his daughter for the first time with full knowledge, felt the emotional upheaval reach its peak. The second bold twist, the betrayal and double cross involving Mia, had exposed how deeply Kane had manipulated everyone. Yet it had also revealed Mia's turning point and the girl's courage. His wealth displayed in the armored vehicle, and the compound waiting ahead felt heavier than ever against the memory of Elena's cold, wind-filled nights of poverty. As the first light of dawn touched the lake, the escalation had reached its climax. Hearts had been torn open wider than ever. Vinny's remorse and love burned with savage intensity. Elena's trust had deepened into something unbreakable. The two little girls, Lily and Mia, had become the bridge between extreme poverty and vast power, their innocent kindness beginning to heal wounds no amount of marble or money could touch. The warehouse confrontation was over, but the real healing was only beginning. The first pale light of dawn in late October 2025 touched the Chicago skyline as Vincent Russo's armored vehicle sped toward a secure private medical facility on the city's north side. The night's chaos still clung to everyone inside the vehicle like a heavy fog. Elena Ramirez sat in the back seat, her thin, malnourished body trembling with exhaustion. She held Lily close, the little girl's head resting against her shoulder, while Mia leaned against her other side. Elena's cheeks remained hollow from years of desperate poverty, her frame weakened by countless sleep-deprived nights spent huddling with the girls under a single thin American flag blanket, while cold winds howled through the poverty-like cracks of their old project apartment. Even now, wrapped in the warmth and safety of Vinny's world of luxury, the humiliating memories of begging landlords and choosing which child would eat the last bite refused to release her. The disparity felt brutally vivid. She had once been utterly powerless, and now she sat beside a man whose wealth could shield entire neighborhoods. Vinny drove with focused intensity, his powerful hands gripping the wheel despite the deep bruise along his ribs from shielding Lily. His tailored black suit was rumpled, the gold watch and ring on his finger catching the faint morning light. The blood revelation from the previous night still echoed in his mind. But the warehouse confrontation and Kane's betrayal had pushed everything to a breaking point. His remorse gnawed at him with savage force guilt for abandoning his own daughter years ago, for trusting Dr. Victor Kane, and for allowing danger to reach his family under his own roof. The paternal love he felt for Elena burned with passionate intensity, a deep protective attachment that had ignited from the first moment he saw her fragile strength. It clashed violently with the ruthless empire builder he had been forced to become, leaving his heart in a state of extreme psychological shock and violent inner conflict. They arrived at the private hospital wing reserved for high-profile cases. Doctors moved quickly, their expressions shifting from professional calm to quiet concern as they examined Lily and treated Vinny's injuries. Elena stood nearby, her voice soft and timid as she answered questions. She has been getting those special shakes. They always made her feel worse. She whispered politely to the lead physician, even as anxiety made her feel dizzy and off balance. The stark contrast hit her again. This clean, well-equipped facility with its advanced equipment represented a level of care she could never have afforded in her old life of cold, wind-filled nights and humiliating poverty. The hospital revelation came swiftly and decisively. Blood tests and toxicology panels confirmed chronic exposure to a rare plant-based toxin, the same substance Marcus had identified in the shake residue. The pattern was deliberate and prolonged, designed to mimic a progressive illness and weaken Lily emotionally and physically, ultimately aiming to destabilize Vinny's empire by breaking him through fatherhood. The doctors' faces grew grim as they explained the findings. If this had continued even a few more weeks, the damage could have become irreversible, one physician said gently. Elena felt a wave of horror wash over her. She swayed, slightly, numbness spreading through her limbs as pain bloomed behind her eyes. The unfairness was almost too much to bear. She had escaped one form of misery, only to have hidden evil nearly steal her daughter in the very place meant to keep them safe. Tears slipped down her cheeks in a moment of condensed emotional stillness as she held Lily's small hand. Vinny stood at the bedside, his powerful frame rigid with tension. The confirmation struck him like a physical blow. His remorse intensified into a violent, tearing storm. He had trusted Kane for years, allowing the man access to his household while he handled tense street confrontations with rivals. Just hours earlier, another bold and unexpected encounter had occurred when Kane's remaining associates tried one final approach near the hospital perimeter, their vehicles slowing deliberately to test security. Vinny had stepped out briefly to confront them with calm, commanding words under the early morning light. No violence, only icy authority that sent them retreating. Yet even that small victory felt hollow against the hospital revelation. He had nearly lost his daughter to the same kind of calculated betrayal he fought on the streets. The paternal love he felt for Elena and the girls, deep and burning, now mixed with overwhelming guilt, leaving him numb and off balance despite his vast wealth. Elena sat beside Lily's bed, her thin fingers gently stroking the little girl's hair. She felt confused and fearful, yet a passionate trust in Vinny continued to grow. She had gone from being a destitute woman, enduring humiliating poverty, to being protected by a powerful man who had risked everything for her child, his child. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, suddenly shielded and valued, left her heart violently torn between lingering shock and profound gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered softly to Vinny when their eyes met across the room, her voice timid and polite even in her exhaustion. "For saving her, for saving us." As the morning progressed, federal agents arrived discreetly. Vinny had made the call himself, choosing justice over protecting his empire's secrets. The evidence Elena had gathered, the photographs, the sample Lily's notebook, and the hospital findings provided more than enough for an arrest warrant. Dr. Victor Kane was located attempting to flee the city and was taken into custody at a quiet roadside location. The arrest was calm, but decisive. When confronted with the evidence, Kane's polished mask finally shattered. In a cold, calculated rant captured on recording, he admitted everything. The slow poisoning had been designed to look like natural illness, intended to break Vinny emotionally, so he could seize control of key assets. He had exploited Mia's fears and groomed her as leverage, knowing the girls' vulnerability from their impoverished backgrounds. The betrayal ran deep, but justice had come swiftly. Elena watched the updates from Lily's hospital room, feeling a complex wave of emotions. Another absurdly unfair event arrived, even in this moment of relief. A final, harassing message from her old landlord's network attempting to exploit the situation with renewed false claims. She read it with trembling hands, the humiliation of her past life crashing over her once more. She felt powerless and desperate again, dizzy with the violent inner conflict between the safety Vinny provided and the world that still tried to drag her back down. Tears fell quietly as she sat in stillness. The luxurious hospital room, a stark reminder of how far she had come, and how much further she still felt from true belonging. Vinny stood outside the room for a long moment, watching Elena and the girls through the window. The inner tearing in his heart had never been more intense. The hospital revelation had confirmed the deliberate nature of Lily's suffering. The arrest had brought Kane to justice, yet the remorse for his own past choices consumed him with savage force. He had built an empire of marble and power while his own daughter endured cold winds and hunger. The paternal love he felt for Elena, protective, passionate, and deeply moving now, demanded he become the father he had failed to be. The violent conflict between his ruthless world and this new reality left him numb and profoundly shaken. In the quiet afternoon, as Lily rested more comfortably, and the doctors confirmed she would recover fully with time and proper care, a moment of condensed emotional stillness settled over the room. Mia sat close to Lily, the two girls holding hands. Elena looked up at Vinny as he entered her eyes, filled with a mix of fear, curiosity, and overwhelming trust. "She's going to be okay," she whispered softly, her voice polite and gentle. The attachment she felt toward him burned brighter than ever, a woman once desperately poor, now protected by a powerful man whose blood ran in her daughter's veins. The shift left her heart violently torn between lingering guardedness and a profound sense of being seen and valued. Vinny knelt beside the bed, his powerful frame gentle as he took Lily's small hand. The little girl looked at him with tired but trusting eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. The words struck Vinny like a healing balm and a fresh wound at the same time. His remorse deepened, but so did his determination. He had faced rivals on the streets with calm authority, yet the greatest battle had been waged inside his own home. Justice had been served with Kane's arrest, but true healing would take far longer. As the October sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the hospital room, Elena felt another wave of deep disorientation. The wealth surrounding them, private care, security resources beyond imagination, stood in brutal contrast to the poverty she had known. Yet in Vinny's quiet presence, she felt a growing sense of safety and attachment that eased the inner storm, if only a little. Her heart remained violently torn, but the direction was shifting toward hope. Vinny watched the three of them, Elena, Lily, and Mia, with eyes that held both torment and tenderness. The hospital revelation and arrest had brought justice, but they had also laid bare the deepest wounds. His empire, his power, his vast wealth, all of it felt secondary now to the fragile family forming in this room. The paternal love that had burned from the first moment now guided him toward redemption. The day's events had delivered revelation, arrest, and the beginning of justice. Yet the emotional tearing continued deep and moving, drawing them all toward a future where protection, compassion, and healing might finally bridge the chasm between extreme poverty and extraordinary power. The final days of October 2025 brought a quieter rhythm to Chicago, though the wind off Lake Michigan still carried a sharp reminder of the storms that had passed. Vincent Russo had moved Elena, Lily, and Mia to a secure suburban safe house just outside the city. A spacious, warmly lit home with soft carpets, large windows overlooking trees, and none of the cold marble austerity of the main compound. It was still a place of considerable wealth, with comfortable furnishings and every comfort provided without question, but it felt gentler, more like a home than a fortress. For Elena Ramirez, the change was both soothing and disorienting. Her thin, malnourished body still carried the deep exhaustion of years spent in extreme poverty, sleeping in fits on cold floors, enduring wind that whistled through cracked walls, and waking hungry so the girls could eat. Even now, surrounded by warmth and abundance, the humiliating memories lingered. She had once been powerless, begging for mercy from uncaring landlords. Now she woke to sunlight and safety, yet the contrast left her heart in quiet, violent turmoil. Lily's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. The doctors had begun gentle treatment to clear the remaining toxin from her system. The little girl's color returned day by day, her hazel eyes growing brighter as she took careful steps around the house. Mia stayed close, her earlier distrust of Vinny softening into cautious curiosity after witnessing his sacrifice in the warehouse. The two girls played with simple toys, building blocks, and a worn Chicago Cubs baseball that Vinny had quietly provided, filling the rooms with tentative laughter that healed something deep inside the adults. Elena spent long hours sitting beside Lily, her voice soft and polite as she read stories or simply held the girl's hand. "You're getting stronger every day, sweetheart," she would whisper, her tone timid yet filled with quiet strength. Inside, however, a storm raged. She felt confused and guarded at times, fearful that the outside world might still reach in. Another absurdly unfair event arrived midweek. A final notice from her old neighborhood agency, renewing false claims about the abandoned apartment and threatening further investigation. Elena read the letter alone in the quiet kitchen, her hands trembling so badly the paper fluttered. She felt desperately powerless, again dizzy with numbness and pain as the old humiliation crashed over her. Tears slipped down her cheeks in a moment of condensed emotional stillness. How could the world continue to punish her even after she had been rescued? The inner tearing was violent gratitude for the safety Vinny provided clashing with the lingering fear that her past poverty would never fully release its grip. Vinny visited every day, often staying long into the evening. His powerful presence filled the rooms, yet he moved with surprising gentleness. The bruise on his ribs was healing, but the deeper wounds in his heart burned hotter than ever. The blood revelation and Kane's betrayal had left him in a state of gnawing remorse that consumed him. He had abandoned his own daughter years ago, choosing the ruthless path of empire building over vulnerability. Now Lily, his blood, lay recovering in a bed he had provided, while Elena, the woman who had shielded her through years of cold winds and hunger, watched over her with exhausted devotion. The paternal love Vinny felt for Elena was passionate and intense, burning from the first moment he had seen her fragile strength. It created a compelling focal point in his soul. a fierce protective attachment that clashed violently with the powerful mafia boss he had been. How could marble luxury and lake views coexist with the memory of the thin American flag blanket and freezing nights his own child had endured? The conflict left him numb and off balance, his heart torn in ways no street confrontation had ever achieved. One afternoon, while the girls napped, Vinny found Elena in the sunlit living room. She stood by the window, looking out at the trees, her thin frame silhouetted against the light. Another tense street confrontation had occurred earlier that day near one of his legitimate businesses. A rival faction had made a bold approach during a routine meeting, their representatives testing boundaries with sharp questions and veiled warnings under the October sky. Vinny had handled it with calm authority, his voice steady as he reasserted control without escalation, but the encounter had left him drained. He approached Elena quietly, his gold watch catching the light. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said, his deep voice rough with emotion. Elena turned her eyes wide with a mix of fear, curiosity, and deepening trust. "Mr. Russo, I don't know how to thank you," she whispered softly, her voice timid and polite. "We had nothing. Cold nights, empty plates, the wind that never stopped. And now?" She trailed off dizzy with the overwhelming shift. The mindset of a woman once desperately poor, suddenly protected and valued by a wealthy, powerful man left her heart violently torn between lingering guardedness and a burning attachment that felt like salvation. Vinny felt the words strike deep. In a quiet moment of condensed emotional stillness, he confessed pieces of his torment. "I failed her. Failed both of you. Before I even knew." His remorse was savage, tearing at him with fresh intensity. He had faced rivals on the streets with commanding presence, yet here he stood humbled by the quiet strength of a destitute woman and two small girls who were healing him with their mere presence. The girls' innocent kindness worked like medicine on his emotional wounds. Lily drew simple pictures of Navy Pier and a tall man holding a little girl's hand, handing them to Vinny with a shy smile. Mia, whose turning point had come in the warehouse, now asked him gentle questions about his own childhood, her earlier warnings about powerful men replaced by cautious trust. Their small acts offering him a drawing, sharing a story, or simply sitting close mended the isolation he had built around himself for years. Elena watched these moments with deepening bonds forming between them all. She felt profound curiosity and attachment toward Vinny, a passionate trust that had grown steadily since the first day. Yet waves of shock and confusion still swept over her. One evening, another unreasonable event tested her, a final harassing call from an old acquaintance in the project, spreading rumors about her sudden change in circumstances. Elena listened in the quiet hallway, her thin body swaying with dizziness and pain. The humiliation was deep and pitiful. She had endured so much, and even now the world tried to strip away her fragile peace. Tears fell as she sat afterward in stillness, her inner world numb and violently torn. Vinny handled the matter discreetly, ensuring the rumors would not spread, but each act of protection only deepened his inner conflict. His wealth displayed in the safe house, the private care for Lily, and the resources that shielded them felt heavier against the memory of Elena's years of cold, wind-filled nights and humiliating poverty. He paced the living room one night, the luxurious surroundings mocking his guilt. The paternal love he felt for Elena and the girls demanded he become better than the man he had been. It clashed violently with the powerful figure who had once chosen empire over family, leaving him in a state of profound, moving torment. As the days passed, the emotional healing deepened in small, tender ways. Lily took her first steady steps across the room without coughing, beaming as Vinny knelt to steady her. Mia laughed freely for the first time in weeks when Vinny joined them in tossing the Cubs' baseball gently in the backyard. Elena watched from the porch, her soft voice offering quiet encouragement. In these moments, the girl's innocent kindness acted as a balm on Vinny's wounds, both the physical bruise on his side and the deeper emotional scars of regret and isolation. Elena's quiet strength anchored them all. Her polite, timid gratitude carried the weight of a woman who had survived absolute misery and now found herself protected by a man whose power and remorse ran equally deep. One quiet evening as October drew to a close, Elena and Vinny sat on the back porch while the girls slept inside. The air was cool but calm. Elena's voice was soft as she spoke. "I was so scared. For so long. Cold nights, empty hands watching the girls go hungry. And then you gave us everything." Her words carried the violent intensity of her emotions, gratitude mixed with lingering fear, trust burning through the confusion. Vinny listened, his heart tearing with remorse and love. He had once built walls to survive the streets. Now those walls were crumbling under the gentle healing of two little girls, and the resilient woman who had raised one of them through poverty's cruelest days. The recovery was not only physical, bonds deepened daily. Vinny's paternal love for Elena grew into a fierce responsibility that guided his every decision. Elena's attachment to him became a source of quiet strength, transforming her from a powerless woman into someone who felt truly seen. The girls, Lily and Mia, became the bridge, their innocent kindness slowly mending the violent emotional storms that had raged inside the adults. As the month ended, the safe house held a fragile but growing peace. The inner tearing continued deep and moving, but it now pointed toward healing rather than destruction. Vinny's wealth and power, once symbols of isolation, were being reshaped into tools of protection and redemption. Elena's long years of humiliating poverty were giving way to a new chapter of safety and belonging. In the quiet moments between them all, the emotional healing took root, slow, profound, and filled with the promise of a future where compassion could triumph over past wounds. The last light of October 2025 faded gently over the Chicago suburbs, painting the sky in soft amber and gold as the wind from Lake Michigan settled into a calmer whisper. In the safe house, nestled among quiet trees, a new kind of peace had begun to take root. Vincent Russo stood on the wide back porch, watching the evening settle his powerful frame, still carrying the faint ache from the bruise along his ribs. The luxurious surroundings, warm wooden floors, comfortable furniture chosen for comfort rather than display, and large windows offering views of peaceful greenery, reflected his vast wealth with quiet intensity. Yet inside, his heart remained in violent turmoil, torn between the ruthless man he had once been and the father he was learning to become. Elena Ramirez sat nearby on a cushioned bench, her thin, malnourished frame wrapped in a soft shawl. Years of extreme poverty had left deep marks. Nights deprived of proper sleep, days deprived of enough food, and countless cold winds that had chilled her to the bone. While she protected Lily and Mia with nothing but a thin American flag, blanket, and fierce love. Even now, in this place of safety and abundance, she sometimes felt the old humiliation rise, powerless, desperate, and small. Yet Vinny's quiet protection had slowly begun to ease those wounds. Her voice, when she spoke, remained soft, timid, and polite. "The girls are sleeping soundly tonight," she said, gently looking up at him with eyes that held both lingering fear and deepening trust. Vinny turned to her, his fair-skinned face etched with lines of inner torment. The blood revelation, the betrayal, and the long days of recovery had intensified every emotion. Gnawing remorse still consumed him for abandoning his own daughter years ago, choosing the path of power over vulnerability. The paternal love he felt for Elena, passionate, intense, and burning from the very first moment he had seen her, quiet strength created a compelling focal point in his soul. It was not romantic. It was a deep protective compassion that transcended any barrier of wealth or poverty, proving that love and kindness could bridge even the widest divide between rich and poor, regardless of skin color or background. This realization brought extreme psychological shock and violent inner conflict. He had built an empire through tense street confrontations, bold, unexpected meetings with rivals where sharp words and icy stares tested his control without ever crossing into violence. Yet here, in this peaceful house, he confronted the greatest challenge of his life, becoming the father Lily deserved. One final, unreasonable event tested them even as healing progressed. A last harassing letter arrived from Elena's old neighborhood, falsely claiming unpaid debts and attempting to stir trouble once more. Elena read it in the quiet kitchen, her hands trembling, feeling once again the pitiful humiliation of her past life. Dizziness and numbness swept over her pain, blooming as the old powerlessness returned. She sat in a moment of condensed emotional stillness, tears falling silently. The inner tearing was almost unbearable gratitude for Vinny's protection, clashing with the fear that poverty's shadow would never fully lift. Vinny handled the matter swiftly and quietly, ensuring it would be the last time such cruelty reached her. Each act of protection only deepened his remorse and strengthened his resolve. In the days that followed, the emotional healing unfolded in tender human moments that enriched every life lesson the experience offered. Lily took stronger steps each morning, her laughter filling the house as she played with Mia. The two girls, bonded by shared hardship and newfound safety, taught Vinny the true meaning of courage and forgiveness. Their innocent kindness became a gentle education in compassion, showing him that real strength lay not in power over others, but in protecting the vulnerable. Through their simple drawings and trusting hugs, Vinny learned that knowledge of one's past mistakes could become the foundation for a better future. He began stepping back from the harshest edges of his empire, choosing instead to focus on legitimate businesses that could create opportunities rather than division. This shift brought its own violent inner conflict, remorse for the years lost, yet profound relief in choosing family over fear. Elena watched these changes with a heart that swelled with overwhelming attachment. She had once been deprived of food and sleep, enduring cold winds that left her desperate and powerless. Now protected by a wealthy and powerful man whose compassion crossed every divide of wealth and poverty, she felt a passionate surge of trust that healed old wounds. In quiet conversations on the porch, she shared fragments of her struggles, her soft voice carrying the weight of someone who had survived unimaginable hardship. Vinny listened with deep attention, his own emotional upheaval mirroring hers. Their bond grew richer in life values, teaching that true education comes not from books or power, but from opening one's heart to another's pain. Knowledge of suffering could foster empathy, while the lesson of resilience showed that compassion could heal even the deepest divides. This humanistic understanding that love and kindness transcend skin color, wealth, or poverty became a quiet education in what truly matters. One golden afternoon, as the last leaves of October fell, Vinny gathered everyone in the backyard. Lily and Mia ran ahead, their laughter bright against the autumn air. Vinny knelt before the girls, his powerful frame humbled. He looked at Lily with eyes full of tears and spoke from the heart. "You are my daughter. I failed you once, but I promise to protect and raise you as my own from this day forward. And Mia, you have shown me bravery beyond your years. I want to adopt you too, so both of you can grow up knowing you are loved and safe." The girls threw their arms around him, their innocent embrace mending years of isolation. Elena stood nearby, her thin hands clasped, feeling a surge of profound emotion. The disparity between her old life of humiliating poverty and this moment of family and belonging left her dizzy with gratitude. She had once been deprived of everything. Now she witnessed love that ignored all barriers of wealth and poverty, proving that compassion could unite any heart. This was a powerful lesson in humanity, an education in forgiveness, and knowledge that true strength lies in vulnerability and care. In the quiet stillness that followed, as the four of them sat together watching the sunset, Vinny reflected on the journey. The experience had offered many life lessons, knowledge that one voice of courage can change everything, a lesson in speaking truth against hidden evil, and an education in how ordinary kindness from the most unexpected places can redeem even places, the hardest soul. Knowledge of pain could lead to greater empathy, while the lesson of resilience taught that healing comes through connection. This education in compassion showed that wealth and poverty cannot separate love when hearts choose understanding. As the story closes, may everyone watching this video enjoy good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like, and share to enjoy many engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to real life and the challenges we all face? Please share your comments below so the creator can listen to the emotions from deep within the viewers' hearts. Goodbye for now, and promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.